Waalaikumsalam.
Selamat Hari Raya, maaf zahir batin.
Selamat Hari Raya, maaf zahir batin.
Maaf lahir batin.
Well, at least something lah. Boleh pakai baju raya juga.
Hello bro. Hi guys. I think we will start. We are still waiting for one more speaker from Malaysia. I think there's some technical issues. So a very good afternoon to all, and I'd like to wish everyone Selamat Hari Raya, maaf zahir batin. We are still in the Hari Raya mood. You can see Shannon is still with Songkok down there. So we have our two speakers. Let me introduce them. Miss Muntas, ILB Law 31 from Singapore, and Mr. Rachman, Pak Rachman from SR Legal from Indonesia. So we are waiting for Dato' Azlim to come in. I'm the host for today, and my friend Zaha will be the co-host. Basically, we will start with the flow of the program. The Zoom program. I will be asking a few questions to Singapore, Ms. Muntas, and also Mr. Rachman to start off with. Then we will open up with question and answer sessions for you all. Okay. So I think without further ado, let me start with the first questions for Ms. we will start with Singapore first, Ms. Muntas. Okay, there was one question being asked by one of the participant, one business owner. So they were asking, what is the legal rights for tenant to ask rental rebate from landlord from the 4 different COVID-19 relief packages that was announced by the government? And we also understand that there are 3 different relief packages for the property tax rebate, cash rebate related to office rental. You can hear my question. There is also Zaha will be sharing the question at the sharing page, so you all can see the questions down there. Okay, Ms. Muntas, over to you.
Okay, so there's only 3 package actually so far. Saya tak tahu lah if I got 4. I've got 3 on my hand. So it's the resilient budget, solidarity budget, and the last one very recently was fortitude budget. The budget basically actually it starts off with the same thing. When they first announced the resilient budget, basically they said for certain sectors that qualify, they will give you a rental rebate. Property tax rebate, which generally will amount to about 1 month of your rental cost generally lah. This rebate is different for different sector. So it really depends on whether or not you are caught in, for example, the tourism sector, the hotel industry sector, and all that. If you do, then you're one of the luckier tenants because then you get to claim about a full 1 month. There are issues with this. I'll go through it, but that's the general basis when the resilient budget came out. And then they left out quite a number of industries. And when the solidarity budget came out, what they did was they improved these industries. They said basically even if industries are not the tourism industries, they are not the airline industries, the hotel industries, they will still give a rental, a property tax rebate, but it's a slightly lower one. I think for most of us, it's about 30% of property tax. The calculation in translation will affect each tenant differently because it is given to your landlord. So your landlord, for example, for my firm even, our landlord is the whole business owner, the owner of the whole building. So how it translates to you may be slightly different because maybe for a tenant that has a bigger square meter, his property tax rebate when the landlord lends it down might be bigger than yours who's owning a smaller square meter. So this led to a few problems, of course, which they tried to deal with in the fortitude budget again. The problem that was immediate was that a lot of young, or not even young, maybe smaller businesses or businesses bigger but have no savings, they saw an immediate problem because they couldn't access the rebate. Even though government announced it, even though landlord was supposed to pass it down, we can't get it. We have not got it. And in fact, my dad as a business, same issue, we're struggling with the same problem. So how do they solve this? Very easy. They then made a subsidiary legislation which writes on the primary law. The primary law is called the COVID-19 Temporary Measures Act. anybody that Googles statute Singapore can find this. You will see section 29 makes it compulsory. It's not a choice. The landlord have to pass down this rebate. But a subsidiary legislation which is on IRAS in your website, which has not been exactly crafted in the law right now, but most lawyers are aware of it, has said that this first rebate that they've given in April in the first budget, this resilience budget, and later on they improve in the solidarity budget, is supposed to be given by July. Why? Pasal for all of you who are business owners or landlords, I think you will know that your property tax for your commercial business is due to be filed by March or April, and then by July you will get any kind of adjustment. So the idea is that it allows the landlord to look at how much they actually get from the rebate, and then to calculate backwards to see how much should they pass on to each tenant. They are supposed to pass on 100%, don't get me wrong, but how it equates to each tenant who has rented different square meters of their property may be different. So that's the first one, the two budget. The last budget, the 42th budget, went on to allow one more month. They have added on one more month of waiver of rental. But this also came on with its own issues. If the easiest, unfortunately, is if you are a government tenant, if you are a government tenant, quite fast. The government even actually for some of the food stall they waive up to 3 months of rent. But for commercial business owners, for people who are not renting from government, then you are still at the whim and fancy in a way of your landlord. They've not given another deadline of when this next rebate is supposed to be passed. But when you look at the actual act, the COVID Act, it actually indicates that all the rebates must be passed by the end of the year. So you can kind of safely assume as a tenant, you will get the first rebate not later than July, and then you should get the next rebate not later by December. It is legislated, which means if your landlord do not give you any rebate, you can actually take up an action. Of course, under the COVID Act, they have a panel of assessor. So you basically can put up a assessor to say, look, you've not been given any rebate, or if you feel your landlord has not been fair, they've not told you exactly how the rebate is calculated, you suspect it's not 100% of what they received, then this valuation panel will look at it and basically give a result, an update of what is the outcome. So it is a criminal offense, in fact, in the fact that if they don't give the benefit, they can be liable for an offense under the new act. So they will give it. It's just a matter of really how long they take to give it, which is somewhat soft by this July and December deadline, and whether or not you can believe that they've given you the full rebate of what they've gotten. So it's there, but there's still a lot of issues inside. So as lawyers, sometimes what we do is we always write first. Sometimes if there's a dispute, I mean, you don't have to need a lawyer lah. You can write your landlord also if you trust them, and see what are the documentation they have, how much rebate they've gotten. Because the fact that it's legislated and mandatory means you can actually ask to see. Can I see how much rebate my landlord has got, so that I can translate into what this means for me? That is the first answer, but I would just like to add a small point. It's a very practical point, and the point is suffered by a lot of small business owners or new businesses, which is, can we just not pay our rent for this month then? Since nanti ada rebate, later we'll get a rebate. Later you have to refund me that money anyway. There is no real law on this. It's really a negotiation. So we've seen landlords who say, okay, you pay half rent first, and then later we work out how much we owe each other after the rebate. But I've also seen landlords say, no, sorry, you pay the full month. When I get the rebate, and then I will deduct off from the following months, or I will refund you. Some landlords are even more creative. I've seen a landlord come and say, we'll give you the rebate in 6 tranches. It's not allowed. So under the law, you are supposed to give them the rebate by July or by December. So if your landlord is creative, they decide to say, we'll give you the rebate in tranches and all that. This is illegal. So you can either go and complain to the panel of assessors, the valuation panel, or hire lawyers. 1-2 letter is not going to cost you much. It's probably going to cost you much lesser than what you would have incurred from allowing the landlord to propose their own creative solution in passing this rebate. Yeah, so that's really the first question. Does anyone have a follow-up? Because I know technically it's very confusing, even though legally it's there. Yeah, do I have any follow-up question? Maybe, for example, I'm not sure how it works, Zahra, but maybe macam, if you all can raise your hand or unmute your mic, then I can take the immediate follow-up question. Because to be fair, we receive a lot of inquiries on this.
I think the question and answer, we save it for later part.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, that works.
At least we can have every lawyers to answer all these questions that we have currently now on hand.
Okay, that works. Okay, so it's a practical question. Most of the questions from most of you, I think, will be what happens if they don't give it, or what happens if it's not legislated July and December and all that. So we can take the questions later at the end of the session, I think.
Yeah, I think can. So okay, basically we have Dato' Azlin already on board. I mean, thank you Dato' for coming in. So Dato' is our is the lawyer from Malaysia. So okay, my next question will be for Dato' Azlin. Dato' Azlin, can you hear me? Okay, I think you need to unmute your speaker, Dato'.
Okay, all right.
Okay, Dato'. Okay, the first question that we have is that if Malaysian has a COVID law, which I guess currently Malaysian does not have a COVID law yet, what are the Malaysian businesses view about this situation when there is no law to protect them?
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very happy Eid Mubarak for all my Muslim brothers and sisters, and a very good afternoon to everyone. So actually in Malaysia, we don't have yet, the COVID Act as it now compared to our neighboring country here, Singapore, right? But actually, as we are speaking now, right, the government and the ministries and all are working out the terms for this COVID Act, and I heard that is going to be tabled in Parliament sometime in July. All right. So it's not too late, and actually, as to your question, Kai, about whether it's required or not, I believe that the businesses in Malaysia and the associations for all the businesses have been pushing for it since March, right, for this COVID Act to be implemented, because as we all know, especially for businesses and also for individuals, there's a lot of our contractual obligations which we cannot fulfill because of the impact of COVID. So the associations have been pressing hard for the government to come up with this COVID Act. So we hope that it will come up soon and be tabled soon. And actually, on hindsight, the good thing about it being worked on a bit later, because in Malaysia we have had our movement control order since March, right? So now it's already June, and we're still working on the COVID Act. But the good thing about it is that this whole thing is an evolving thing. It's evolving, and every day, we learn new things about the how we should run our business, how we should restructure our business and all that. And maybe at the first start of the MCO, where everybody was just at home and not being and trying to adjust to things may not be so clear at that time. All the businesses were just thinking of how to pay the salaries and rentals and all that, and just to keep afloat during the MCO while everybody was at home. But now that in Malaysia we have the conditional MCO, where a lot of the economic sectors are already at work. So when you go to work, then you see that there are a lot of other problems that you need to face, and this is good in the sense that it will give better input to the COVID Act, so that it will cover a lot more things, a lot more aspects as to how we're going to restart our business and revive our businesses. And of course, the main reason why is very important actually for this COVID Act. One is to regulate, all the contractual obligations between the parties. The other one is so that we don't waste, so much time trying to ward off litigations, when we're supposed to focus and concentrate on reviving our businesses. And if it's table in July, hopefully, and things get implemented, the important thing is that it's retrospective, that it's done and effective since March, right? And maybe also I think in Singapore the temporary measures is only is for 6 months, if I'm not mistaken, is it? Right, but maybe they should consider, right, having all these measures which they're going to put in place for a longer period of time. Because if you see what's happening now, this is June, and businesses are just trying to get back on their feet, and it will take a long time. And people talk about 6 months, when it was March, they talk about 6 months and things will be okay. But 6 months from March will be September, and now September is very near. So I think if something is done in Malaysia now for the COVID Act, I think is best that they actually think of something, for the next, even like until the end of 2021, right? So that is like a 1.5 year thing, because it will take a long time for businesses to get back in order. Yeah. Kai?
Okay, thank you, Dato'. Okay, thanks, Dato', for the explanation. I think we will go to our Mr. Pak Rashman for the question for the Indonesian. Okay, basically, is COVID-19 automatically the basis of forced measure implementation in Indonesia?
Well, even though the government announced that COVID-19 is a national disaster, it's not automatically can be used as a basis for force measure, because each party should at least give arguments or explanation how this situation uh, uh, cause one of the party unable to perform its obligation under the contract. So I think it's not COVID-19, but it's a movement restriction that can be used as a basis for force majeure.
I think for the benefit of those who just joined us, so our three speakers, Ms. Muntas is from IRB Law, is from Singapore, and Mr. Rachman, Pak Rachman, SR Legals from Indonesia, and Dato' Azlin, also a trained lawyer and also a president for Peniagawati. So these are the three speakers. So we actually start our first questions, first round of questions. So I'm going to start to the second round of questions. I think there is a lot of questions actually from the floor, because everybody is getting excited asking about all these legal issues, legal aspects in different countries. So let me go back to Ms. Muntas again. I mean, another question for you. I mean, a person who is already a bankrupt and cannot make monthly payment, does this law protect them? I mean, as a person or as a business? Unmute your.
Yes, thank you. Sorry. Unfortunately, no, not really. You can see that the COVID-19 temporary measures, and Dr. Azlin was right, it was said to be enforced for the next 6 months at least. Government can extend, of course, but it's interim, it's a temporary measure. It is to deal specifically with the impacts brought about by COVID, which means for current bankrupts already, which obviously their financials must have been affected before COVID. The Act doesn't necessarily help you. The Act helps future bankrupts. So what the Act did, which is quite ingenious and is causing quite a bit of issues with our current clients, is that it has increased insolvency and bankruptcy limit. For example, if I have someone that owes me 15,000 previously, I could file to make him bankrupt if he doesn't pay me. So all our letter of demands, our statement of claim in court, we can have the fear of making them bankrupt, which is how we get back most of what is due or owed to us. But this act has now allowed the government to change, to modify, they call it the Bankruptcy Act, to say now the debt has to be 60,000. I understand where it's coming from, because they do suspect there are a lot of businesses, a lot of people will suffer some financial setback, either because we are going to lose our job, unemployment rate is very high, going up, or businesses are being sued because maybe they couldn't pay, maybe they couldn't perform, maybe they couldn't meet their obligations because they are paying by the employee in the same month that their business could not be operating at all. So they've done this temporary shift. They shifted the amount to 60,000 for bankruptcy, even higher for insolvency. I can't recall offhand what it is, but I think it's from 100 to 250, something like that. But it helps future people, which means if right now I have clients who come to me, or in between their proceeding, they say, I want to make this person bankrupt, I will then say, hey, your debt hasn't hit that amount. I cannot make him bankrupt based on this. So it helps future people who are in trouble now. But what I can say practically, if a bankrupt right now, because this question came from the floor, I'm assuming someone we know is a bankrupt right now that cannot even meet their current. If in Singapore, usually it's a debt repayment scheme. They have a monthly payment they make to the official assignee to settle their debts, or maybe they have an order that of bankruptcy, and now they're even worse. Maybe they've lost their job, they can't even make maybe house payment. I can imagine that the courts will have that in consideration, in the sense that maybe the court will give longer adjournments for parties to negotiate, to mediate, to file documents. I can imagine the court will encourage parties to mediate, even if you've met the 60,000 to make someone bankrupt and all that. I think the flavor around bankruptcy and solvency is to favor the person in debt currently. This is of course problematic for people who are actually the ones that is being owed, because it also means you get into a further financial crisis because you cannot go after people who owe you. But at the end of the day, it's a system that they're tweaking just for a temporary measure to see whether or not it can be worked out. Like what Dr. Azlin said, because it's a temporary measure, you cannot run away from it. So it's not a case where someone can say, oh, I owe you 25,000, you cannot make me bankrupt. Okay, I'm just not going to pay. They will change it again, obviously. So the day that they revise back to the amount that is the normal amount, then you will see an influx of bankruptcy proceedings and influx of insolvency proceedings. So it's not meant to stop your obligation. It's meant to give you time to survive. It's like a float. Yeah.
Okay, understand. So, yeah, I mean, on the later part, if you have any further question to this particular questions, then you can do. Okay, so the next question for Dato' Azlin. I read the news, a few news that a lot of Malaysian businesses, shops are forced to be closed during the MCO and during this tough period of time. So if tenants who do not fulfill the rental and was forced to close shop during COVID because they did not manage to fulfill the rental, can the landlord, take the tenant or ask them to leave, leave their premise. But it is, the shop is not making money, it's not having good business due to this COVID-19.
Okay, before I answer that question, maybe I just say something about of course, this rental issue is a big issue in this for businesses in this COVID-19 period, right? Because it is a big chunk of the overhead expenses for businesses, and I think in the absence of COVID-19, like in Singapore, because all that is spelled out in the COVID-19 Act, right? So here in Malaysia, in the absence of that, the government has tried to help in terms of this issue of the landlord and the tenants, where for premises which are owned by the government or government-linked companies, a lot of the rentals have already been waived, and recently the government has also given incentive for landlords to reduce rentals by 30%, for which they will get a tax deduction. But after having said that, landlord and tenant relationships is based on their contracts. It's based on their tenancy agreement. So at the end of it, although the government may say that may encourage landlords to reduce by 30% and give them a tax deduction or whatever, it's not legally binding on the landlords. They may or they may not, right? In the end, they may still revert back to their tenancy agreement. So to answer your question, you have to look at the tenancy agreement. Right. Firstly, whether in the tenancy agreement, if it says that you're allowed to terminate anyway, there is a notice that can be given, a 2 months notice say that can be given if you want to terminate the tenancy agreement. So if a company has gone bust during this COVID-19 period, or even if they haven't gone bust, or they are just having some problems financially, then they will still be able to get out of the tenancy agreement. That'd be very good for those tenants who have actually put in that clause inside the tenancy agreement. In fact, I think that's a good way for businesses to do it, because sometimes you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, this is a COVID-19 effect, but there may be other times when you're affected, your business is affected by other things. So it's always good to put in a notice of termination in case you want to terminate the contract. So if you have that, that says that you can terminate the tenancy agreement by giving a notice, then you're fine. Right, you can just give the landlord the notice, and you can end the tenancy agreement. So if you don't have that, then it comes back to whether you have a force majeure clause in your tenancy agreement, and whether it's spelled out clearly, and can include this COVID-19 effect as a force majeure event. All right. So if you have that, then again, you can terminate the contract, and come out okay. Even if you have closed your business. So of course, I know whenever we discuss about force majeure, after the discussion about force majeure, we talk about the doctrine of frustration. If you don't have your force majeure clause, whether this can be considered as frustrating the contract because of COVID-19, you had to shut your business, and because of that, you cannot continue with the tenancy. So you got to look at all those things to see whether, right, you can actually terminate the contract even if your business have closed down. All right, the fact that your business have closed down, does not automatically give you the right to terminate the contract, and the landlord actually can insist that you go on, or you pay the outstanding rentals allowed for the rest of the tenancy period, right? So I think if the question is that if you close shop, all right, you can, does it automatically give you the right to terminate the agreement? No. All right, does it give the landlord the right to sue you for the balance? It depends whether you have your force majeure. It depends whether other clauses are there to protect you. But if not, then the landlord does have a right to claim for the outstanding rentals throughout the tenancy tenure. And but then as regards to eviction and all that, I think um for this current moment, right? I mean, it's not easy also for landlords to go evicting people, or starting any legal proceedings against tenants and all that. In fact, in Malaysia, I've hardly heard of any landlord who has gone to do such things, because landlords are affected too. And in this CMCO period in Malaysia, I mean, people are not so mobile, right? And even if they are mobile, they have a lot of other challenges, whether they are landlords, they are tenants, they are businesses, they are individuals, or whoever. They have a lot of challenges. So I think it will take some time, for landlords to think about evicting the tenants from the premises, even if, right, the tenants have not been paying the rental, or have moved out, or I mean, or I just not going to continue the tenancy. So, but as Muntaz said just now, I mean, this is all a temporary measure. We're just thinking about how to stop and defer these things for the 6 months. After the 6 months, all right, when everything is back to normal, when it comes to all these proceedings and rentals, and life gets back to more of a normal thing, where people can go and see their lawyers and all that. There may be more legal suits when people start when people get to think about what they want to do next. But for the time being, I think it's landlords will not evict you or whatever, right? I mean, it's something that will need to be addressed at a later stage, and hopefully, if in Malaysia we have this COVID Act soon, maybe it can cover the tenants in that the respect when it comes to the rental payments. Okay.
Okay. Basically, the chat is open for you all to put your questions inside. So it's not only Siraj can type, everybody can type. So no worries. So if you all have any questions that I can ask for you all later also, or maybe if you want to ask personally also can, but there's two options for you. One is the option that you can chat, another option is you just raise your hand, then you will unmute you lah. So next question will be for Pak Rachman. So how does force measure affecting business in Indonesia?
Okay. First of all, the government led the central government, led the provincial government, and the city's administration to decide on the restriction of business and people's movement. So so in Indonesia, for example, in Jakarta, where this is the most impacted area, the restriction imposed by the governor and the governor proposed to the central government, and the central government approved such proposal. So in Jakarta, for example, it's quite unique because the governor allow two business that actually not recommended by the central government, which are hotel and construction. So despite the policy guideline by the central government, the provincial government may deviate from such regulation. So in Indonesia, in mall, for example, in malls, we can open for food and supermarket, but for food you cannot dine in, you just take order. And for supermarket you can open. It just takes some protocols imposed by the supermarket. So most impacted by this restriction is other stores like clothing, shoes, and other stores, electronic goods, etc. The government did not issue any guidance or regulations how to solve rental issues between stores affected by such restriction. However, the local government, because the property tax is charged by local government, may provide some tax benefits. But in Jakarta, I'm afraid we don't have such tax benefits or tax reduction. But I know in Bandung, the city's administration is quite aggressive. They give tax reduction 30 to 50% for restaurant and hotel. In Jakarta, the governor only stating that you may postpone the payment for the tax property 2 to 3 months, and there is no increase of tax property for this year only. Again, I think it's similar to other jurisdiction. When it comes to force measure, you need to look into your tenancy agreement. What does it say about force majeure? Because this is something that we're not familiar with this condition. Most of the contract, I don't think they will have pandemic word into the contract, but I think whenever the government issues regulation that prohibit us to perform our obligation, then it's one of the reasons of force majeure. So I think, in my opinion, any tenant impacted by such restriction may argue that it should not be obliged to pay the rental during such restriction. However, I noted in some newspaper that some malls give discount like 50% to its tenant that impacted by such restriction.
Okay. So basically, thank you, Mr. Pak Rasman. So Muntas, I think there's one question by Shanan from the chat. He was asking, I'm technically a tenant. My office is a co-working space where I am considered a member in my agreement with a co-working space company. Can I still approach the assessor if the co-working space company refuses to give the rebate? So the co-working space company may be a tenant and not a landlord. So Shanan, is that the question?
Yep.
Yep.
Shannon, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I see your question. It is again one of the complex areas, which means because technically the law says the landlord has to pass to the tenant. So if you follow that, it means, for example, let's say the landlord is A, so A owns the whole building. A passes the property tax rebate to B, who's one of his tenants. But you are sharing a co-space with this tenant. Does it mean then you get to partake in this rebate? Or does it mean it's a separate contract? Unfortunately, it's grey, but my own opinion, I can give you a quick opinion. If, depending on your contract with your main tenant, but if there is nothing in this contract, which is usually the case, because obviously you don't expect suddenly the government to kasih rebate or suddenly off. But if there's nothing in the contract, for example, I would imagine that enforcing your legal right is very difficult because the benefit is to the tenant. So you being a person that has shared the co-space may not be able to rely on that to say I'm also a tenant. This is different if you are a sub-tenant. If let's say you rented the whole tenant from a second tenant, I would argue that your legal right is stronger because you can argue that there is a chain. You give A give to B, B should give to C because at the end of the day, C is the one that incurred the rental. But for yours, because it's a co-space, it's a bit grayer. I would imagine that it will be something quite unique if it goes to court. Whether or not they will rule in your favor will one rely a lot on your contract. If your contract is empty, legally I say it will be very difficult to argue that you are a tenant that should benefit from this because you did enter into the agreement with the landlord. Yeah, but it's worth a shot lah. It's worth a shot to negotiate. It's worth a shot to mediate because at the end of the day, if you imagine if the tenant is paying 5,000, if you own space, you're also paying part of his 5,000. So if he gets a rebate, then you should be getting a rebate. But would that translate into an immediate 100% or immediate 1K off? It's very difficult to tell because he obviously is not going to charge you something that he didn't benefit. So whatever that he rented his co-space from you, it is not going to be in proportion to what he paid to the landlord. So you see, you have all these mechanical, mathematical ways to do. It is worth a shot to negotiate. I don't see why not, but I would imagine if it actually really reaches the court, you or the panel of assessor, even whether you argue whether you're a tenant that should benefit from this, I think a lot will fall back on your contract.
Yeah. Thanks for the answer. When I signed the contract, I also noticed that it's a member and not tenant. I was quite hesitant to sign the contract actually. based on that note. But I think it's a practice across all co-working spaces in Singapore. So I think thousands, not hundreds, thousands are affected. Is there any way that we can collectively go against all these co-working space companies together? Would that be a stronger case?
Okay, it's a very good question. We have a lot of clients that come to us and say we want to start a class action, an action where a few people join together. Singapore is not known for this because there is always this question of whether or not all of them have the same case theory and whether or not their defenses cross each other. So, for example, me representing even a husband and wife, if their defense might conflict or affect each other, I cannot act for both. So because of the very stringent laws on our joint plaintiffs or joint defendants, we call it, you don't see a lot of class action in Singapore. But what you do see, which is quite good recently, I don't know if you've noticed it, Shannon, is groups of people have come together to write to MPI, to ask MPI to give some kind of guidance, to ask MPI to give some kind of advisory to say, look, we are a group that has been troubled by this. We are, for example, if you remember a few months ago, all the food stalls owners who were being subjected to pay rent when they close their shop. They cannot even close their shop for 1 day, 2 days. They have to pay fee for closing. They came together and they wrote to NEA and all that. And then what they did was they came up with of course, media covered it. Obviously, we know Sito covered it. It became a big thing. But basically, they came up with advisory and guidelines. Advisory and guidelines are not long, but it generally forces your landlord or your tenant to comply with it for the idea that he knows if he reaches the court, there is a chance, even though it's not law, the court might not rule in their favor because it is not something normal, because it's an area of law that's grey. There's no case law that says, oh yes, you are tenant, or no, you're not a tenant. So everybody is running a risk. But when there is a guidance and advisory on this, then the worry is that when there is a grey area, yet there is a guidance by the government, if we go to court, the law will shift our side. So you see in a lot of these cases, right, it gets settled out of court. Nobody wants to find out the answer. Everybody is worried because if I actually go, I litigate, I sue, and then I lose for what? And you see a lot of the landlords, right, a lot of the major players, the bigger players, they will try and settle out of court. So there is a benefit to a group of you coming together. There is a benefit to place some pressure to try and see whether or not we can get some guidance, some advisory, so that we can renegotiate with our landlords. And I genuinely think it is worth a shot, because if you are sharing a co-space, besides your contract, which may label you as a member and all that, in actual fact, if you have control over that space, you pay your own employees, maybe even if you can bring in your own visitors, you're not confined by any of the rules of that particular landlord, arguably you are a tenant, you are a subtenant, arguably. So I would say it is worth a shot. It's just that it's too grey for me to tell you, confirm Tana, you can do it. I'm not confident of saying it. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, do we have any Malaysians that want to ask anything to Dato' Azrin? If not, I have a few more questions to ask her.
Can I just add on to just now
the
question? Actually, here in Malaysia, we're very happy that since the MCO started, there's been a lot of groups coming together. I mean, you find associations, for various industries. You find groups of people with particular grouses and all coming together to push the government for a lot of things. And I think like what Mumtaz said just now, there's a lot of people can sharing this co-working space, and they're all in the same position. And actually, if we think about it, I mean, they are subtenants. I don't see how they can be. I mean, whether you call them members or whatever, basically they are paying part of the rent. For the premises. So if even if they don't have an association or whatever, if they have an association, that'd be very good. Then they can push the government for certain things to fight for their rights. But even if they don't, right, then maybe they can just get together so that the government is more aware that that there is this group of people who is maybe left out, because when you see the whole picture, maybe you don't see people in the co-working space and all that, because you see really big picture. But maybe that's something that the people in the co-working spaces can get together and push for the government to have an advisory on it. I think in Malaysia we've done many of those, right? And I think the government has been very, very proactive in listening to many associations. I remember from the start of the MCO, they were like having engagement. The Ministry of Finance was having an engagement with associations like the whole day, every day. During since the start of the MCO, so that they can do some advisories on certain things, and how to guide people in a very unprecedented situation now. So I think I would agree that something be brought to your government about this co-working space, because I think it'd be a shame, if your rebates get stuck to the main tenant. I don't see why that main tenant should get. I don't think that's quite fair. Yeah.
Datuk, I think there's one question from Jay asking, apart from office rental, utility bills, Wi-Fi, water, electricity, does rebate apply? Office
Sorry?
okay, utility bills, for example, Wi-Fi, water, electricity, does rebate applies for that? If let's say office still closed for operation, yet bill payment remain the same.
Actually, this problem, I mean, even I personally, for my business, I feel that this is really grossly unfair. Actually, we have been fighting from the beginning for utility payments, like electricity, I mean, water is not so much, but telcos and all that, right, to give discounts, and rebates, for their services. And even, I mean, it's not even services, because we were not actually at the office to utilize all the the Wi-Fi in the office anyway. But I think somehow the government is quite slow in doing that. I'm surprised that the government doesn't just issue an advisory or directive to say that for all Wi-Fi's, or in office premises, that 50% discount should be given, because nobody's in the office, right? But they didn't do that. And even like for me, when I came back to office, and I have this big bill to pay for for services which are not used, and they came back and said, you pay first, and then you pay first, and we'll figure out the whether any discount can be given later. Which I think at this particular time, when everybody's like trying to assist in this situation and all that, I cannot understand why the government didn't actually force the telcos to do that, because it's actually because they look at issues about rental and all that, and because utilities is a big sum to pay for businesses. So I think I would urge the government, the Malaysian government, to look at this, especially, I mean, because we were all out of our office, and some are still out of their office now. It's been like 2.5 months. So who's using the Wi-Fi in the office? So I think they should be fair in dealing with this situation. But currently we got to pay first, and see whether there is a rebate to be done, to be given later, which is at the discretion of the telcos.
Okay, Pak Rachman, I think I got one more question for you. Can force measure and hardship be implemented as a reason to cancel of achievement in the contract during the pandemic?
Sorry, what do you mean by achievement in the contract?
Yeah, that means if let's say during this period of time, is there any ways that we can cancel a particular contract? That means a party A or party B, that kind of thing.
Oh, okay. Cancellation actually in the standard force majeure clause, usually we put like 6 months period, when if the force majeure conditions continue after 6 months, the party may terminate the agreement. So it depends on the clause in the agreement actually. So it's not automatically each party may terminate the contract based on the COVID-19 or because impacted by restriction imposed by the government. I think the way I see it is you may not perform your obligation because it's prohibited by the government. You need to show to the other party that there is no other solution to perform such obligation, and if your standard, if the clause didn't say about period of force majeure, it only means that it doesn't you don't have the right to terminate it. Just you have the right not to perform your obligation during the force majeure period.
Okay, thank you, Pak. So
Sorry,
there's
Kai.
another, yeah.
Sorry, Kai. May I ask Mr. Rashman a question? Okay, similar to Singapore and Malaysia, they are also facing all this rental fee that you need to pay. However, I believe in Indonesia, we pay rental for the whole year, one lump sum, right?
Yes, that's the general practice that house, apartment, usually they pay for, and also actually malls, they ask for even 2 or 3 years, because actually the tenant trying to secure the charge. So that's why most of the time they paid 1 year in advance.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, but I think I just would like to share my experience. It's not in the apartment or house or office. It's actually in my kids' school. Actually, most of the parents questions how the schools enjoy the efficiency they is perceived during this period, because the electric bills will be reduced. There's no Wi-Fi. Most likely they will stop the securities and others non-essential employees. So many parents in Indonesia request the school to reduce the monthly tuition, but unfortunately there is no involvement of government in these matters. But I think it's quite fair that the government should intervene in these matters, because I don't think it's right that certain parties enjoy benefits out of this condition. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, answer. Okay, I got one more question for, I think, Mumtaz. Does a company that want to terminate any staff during this COVID period need to fulfill the proper requirement of paying the employee according to MM, or they can just pay the employee according to the numbers of working day?
Okay. Before I answer that, I just want to address Shannon one last time. Shannon, I assume you're a Singaporean, am I right? Okay, so there is actually a property e-tax guide, because I found your question quite interesting. So I went to do a bit of research. You can find it on IRAS website. It's not something that is going to be in your favor, unfortunately. But when you find it, look at paragraph 9.5 later, okay? So it basically says the property owner is required by law to pass the rebate to your tenant. Okay, but the owner or the tenant is not required by law to pass this to a subtenant. So even a subtenant tak ada requirement to pass. So for a cold space person, even more difficult. Of course, like what Dato' has said, what I said earlier, this is just the law. It doesn't mean that there is there's nothing in your contract, and there's no argument for you to say, look, I don't think I was a person envisioned before. So because I was not envisioned, I would like to now raise whether or not I can be covered, or whether or not we can negotiate on this, since you have saved up, you have saved a portion of your own liabilities with this rebate. But just take a look at that. So IRAS is an e-tax guide. And for the Singaporeans in this webinar, it will also tell you the 2 dates I quoted you earlier, your magic dates. They have to pay you the first rebate by July and the second one in December. So this is in the e-tax guide, okay, for all those looking for property tax. Okay, so the next question is from Jay. Interesting, Jay, you should ask me this. I'm actually an employment lawyer more than anything. I am also an MOM prosecutor before this, so employment is like my forte. Again, the answer is not going to be something you like. Unfortunately, if you want to terminate a staff, you have to follow proper notice. You have to pay them for the full month, even if in the event that they are not working. So especially during COVID, mungkin they're at home, they cannot work, or they work certain days, or they're working from home. There is an advisory on MOM. You can Google it. The advisory is called cost saving measures. Just Google advisory MOM cost saving measures. It would tell you, number one, whether or not for employees that are not working, whether you can continue to pay them or not pay, or what's the salary reduction you can do. The idea is because we have to remember Singapore government have a JSS, a job support scheme. So it is not possible for you to not pay them at all, because you are actually getting some payment from the government. So there is some calculation there. It also tells you, in the event that your cost saving measures is not enough, that you have to let them go. What will constitute what we call retrenchment? Be careful, Jay, because when you let go of too much number of employees, or because you're saying the business cannot survive, there is an assumption that it's a retrenchment. There is an assumption if more than 5 employees is let go, so it's a retrenchment. The reason why you have to be careful is retrenchment carries its own benefits. You have to pay between 2 to 4 weeks per year of service. So it can actually make your company go into even more deeper financial distress during this time. So two parts. Number one, you have to pay their full salary unless they were not working at all. Then go and look at this advisory of how much you have to pay. Number two, notice has to be given properly. So if you want to terminate them, you have to give them the 1 month, 2 months, or if there's nothing in your contract, the Employment Act covers notice period. Then lastly, not what part of your question, but something you should know. Practically speaking, when you let them go, be careful not to show that the company is going through a retrenchment exercise, because then you expose the company to paying retrenchment benefits certain workers, and that may be something that you totally don't want to do actually. Yeah, so that's something that I hope has answered your question. Yeah.
Okay, Dato' Azlin, I think one question from Jay again. Invoicing clients have been put to a halt at the moment. Projects being postponed due to COVID-19 MCO. Does the client have the right to cancel the project when the agreement does not state cancellation in any part of the clause of the Dato', your speaker.
The work has been done, is it?
I think maybe during the MCO, usually because of these things, usually the work is halfway through lah.
The work is halfway through. So there's no contract.
There's a contract. That means there's a contract binded, but the contract does not state any cancellation in any part of the clause. That means, yeah.
Actually, yeah, that's where we need to review the contract very in detail, because sometimes there's a lot of things in there that it may not fall in under a certain clause, but it falls in under another clause. But of course, we come back to our discussion again of whether that project can be cancelled or not due to force majeure and doctrine of frustration. But I guess if it is no longer possible to carry on that certain project, right, but there is work that has been done, I think it's fair that the work that has been done, if the invoice is for work that has been done, then that portion of the work that has been done for sure has has to be paid because it's been done. All right, whether you can terminate the contract or not, especially as related to a lot of event management companies, a lot of tourism related companies, a lot of these contracts are now almost impossible to continue, because like in Malaysia, and I'm sure in other region as well. I mean, we're not allowed to have mass gathering, we're not allowed to have events and all that. So a lot of those in events and tourism related industries are not able to continue with the contract, right? So for the work that has been done so far, I feel that in the that portion, maybe need to be paid, and then find a way out to get out of this contract if you can't deliver and perform it anymore, right? But if right, there is a way to postpone, suspend, the performance of the contract, I think the parties should sit down and work together. Like now, there's a lot of contracts. Say, for example, an event is supposed to be done in September, and work has been started on it, and then now it has to be shelved and postponed to a later date, right? So, like in this kind of situations, I think that the parties need to like sit down and postpone that project till later, and make sure that it is postponed and not cancelled. But it's not easy to advise on these things, because actually you need to look at the contract, and advise according, so that the advice will be accurate, you know.
Okay. Is there anybody on the floor that have any more questions for our speakers?
I have a question for Pak Rashman. Okay. As we know, Indonesia has a lot of factory workers that covers the factory. And during COVID-19, I believe Indonesia practiced this called PSBB. So
Yes.
most of the worker has to go back home, and they are not allowed to be around the factory, because if they are around, then they would actually get infected or whatsoever. So I read a few lines on Google that the government practice pay P pemutusan.
PHK, pemutusan
Yes.
hubungan kerja.
So is that I just don't really understand. Is that terms actually supported by the government, or the company have the right to subsidize them while they are not at work?
Well, actually, first, the government only give tax tax benefits. For example, that the income tax of the employee shall be borne by the government. So that's the support by the government. And also the government issue policy, there should not be any layoff or termination of employment by companies. The government also introduced in, many tax benefits for the companies, and the government also instructed the government state-owned bank, the state-owned banks, and urged private banks to restructure the financial obligations that the companies have and also individuals have. So it's government already gives many incentives in this matter. But of course, well, I spoke one of the client, even though they in fact slightly affected by this condition, still they terminate one or two the employees, because during this condition, the labor law stated that this will be under the force majeure condition. The company may only pay one-time severance payment as regulated by the laws, while during the normal conditions, the companies has to pay 2 times of the severance payment as regulated by the labor law. So we have experienced that companies using this condition to terminate non-performing employees, so they only pay one-time severance pay.
Thank you, Pak Rasman, for the answers.
Yeah, I think we have been asking questions to the lawyers for all our businesses. Let me ask this question to the lawyers. How are they themselves coping with their business during this COVID-19? I think we start with us first. How are you all, I mean, we start with Pak Rasman also can. How are you guys coping with your own business during this COVID-19? Because, I mean, you are also a businessman. You are also holding a firm, running a firm, and I mean, we have been asking questions about our own business, but how about you guys? How about your business as a lawyer, as having a law firm?
Yeah, well, and in my part, well, my experience, lawyers, the less affected when it comes to crisis, because when the business is closing down, the client asks us to liquidate the companies or file for bankruptcies. So as a corporate lawyers, we still have work to do. In my experience during the crisis, I think the worst 1998 and 2008. 1998, we were busy as hell. 2008, it's only about 6 to 9 months that we have impacted by the financial crisis. But after that, we are business as usual. Well, how we cope with the daily operation, of course, unlike Malaysia, the government didn't issue any regulation whether lawyers can open their office or not. But we have clients that operates in food and beverages and energy that is allowed to operate, and they still asking for our assistance. So most of the time we work from home. There's no meeting. The clients also doing Zoom meeting. So that's how we survive.
How about ILB, Mumtaz? How does the company doing during this period?
Yeah, I agree partly with Pak Rahman. Generally, law firms, because of the nature of a pandemic or the nature of a crisis, we are usually not the first persons you think of in suffering, because we continue to have consultations usually when businesses are not sure what to do, individuals are not sure what to do. So, for example, I hit most of the employment crime and family dispute. You can see an uptick in our crime inquiries because people get charged for going out during the circuit breaker. People get charged for beating their wives or their mother-in-law, whatever, all these domestic abuse cases because they're stuck at home. You see an uptick in employment, but you do see an impact on certain areas of law. So, for example, very easily I can say because of the measures to increase bankruptcy and insolvency limit, we will definitely get impacted in terms of our civil proceedings, because now clients have to be owed much more before they can commence these proceedings. That's an area that's affected. You get affected for certain areas of family law, for example, because from my own experience, I've been a family lawyer for about 5 years, 6 years now. Generally, when it comes to family, like divorce and all that, clients wants to see you. It's an emotional connection that they make. So when you are in circuit breaker or when you are working, like right now, they say our offices are closed, but in essence, because of their measures, we can't really work functionally completely, because we have to be in split teams. We cannot all be in the same area and all that. So you will see a impact on our business revenue, whether or not you want it. So my law firm has seen it. We still continue to get inquiries and all that, but you do see people also being slower to spend. They are more conscious because they're worried they will lose their job. They're worried, so it helps when you find a firm, for example, that charges you consultation, instead of saying, oh, you have to engage me, you have to pay this money, then we will work for you. So sometimes, even though consultation is painful, like sometimes tell me, oh, why do I have to pay you $200 for consultation, 250? But maybe I can teach you all the answer in that consultation. Then you can do it yourself, because there are things that we can do ourselves. We just don't have the knowledge. So sometimes the consultation is cheaper, but it can equip you with the knowledge. So for employment, for example, I have almost all my clients are on consultation basis, because all they need to know is, what do we do? What do the laws say? What can we do? And then you teach them, and they're okay. They save the legal fee in you representing them. So you plus minus, you learn to adjust, is the new norm. So we come up with creative ways of trying to advise them, make sure they know their rights, and yet we don't go out of business, of course. So yeah.
Okay. So that means lawyers are doing good business, law firms are doing good business. How about Dato' Azlin, from Malaysia point of view?
Okay, Abid, thank you very much, guys, for asking about us. At least somebody cares. Before this, like nobody's asking how the lawyers are doing. So of course, for us in Malaysia, I mean, lawyers were allowed to start work when the CMCO started on the 4th of May. But of course, before that, as Muntas says, clients will always have all their problems and will call you, and ask for some advice. Like for me, I do a lot of corporate and conveyancing. Okay, so I noticed also that during the MCO, of course, there's a lot of my clients. We have to vary their agreements. We are asking whether force majeure will kick in. All those clients who are like supplying things across the borders, who have problems with logistics, and the raw materials are not arriving, and they're not able to perform their contractual obligations and all that. So we still have many of those clients who call us during the MCO when we were not supposed to be, we were working from home, to ask what to be done, where the contracts were concerned. But where conveyancing is concerned, which is a transfer of property, it's been a very difficult time, for the firm, because to do a transfer, you need there are many parties involved. There's the land office, there's the stamp office, there's many parties that we work with along the way to make sure that the transfer of property is executed, right? So all that were like couldn't go on, all that since the MCO, all that couldn't go on. And even now, right, now we're still in our CMCO, but the land office and all that are open. They are open, but they only take in about 20 applications per day. So you can imagine that before this, they used to do all these transfers by the hundreds. So now, because of the SOP and the social distancing and all that, they only take about 20 applications per day. So we have a massive backlog, all right, which is not attributable to the firm. But sometimes clients have this, they like to blame everything on the lawyers. They always say there's the lawyers that's delayed. They don't want to understand that there are many other parties involved in a lawyer's work. Even for people who do litigation, for example, all the cases has been stuck because the courts are closed. Because things are slower, because people are just adjusting to doing things. But generally, I mean, I agree with my fellow lawyers. I mean, it's like for law, yeah, there's of course we have our ups and downs, but inshallah, right, I mean, the demand for the services in one way or another, whether it's litigation or corporate, or after this, if people want to sell their houses or buy something else, or they have problems with their loans or whatever, they will still come to lawyers. And I think the if people can take this as a lesson, like now, right, people who have no contracts, no agreements, are like no force majeure clause in their agreements, and who didn't bother to review their contract before they sign, I think they realized that it is very important to make sure that all your contracts are okay, because who knows what's going to happen in the future, right? So I hope everybody will think about that, and just don't think about the fact that lawyers are expensive. In Malaysia, they like to say that, before going to lawyers, they say that the lawyers are expensive and that they don't need the agreement. So I think it's good if we can all learn from this.
Yep. Sorry, I just want to add very quickly. I think the next few questions, all three questions are for me actually. So maybe I just try and deal with it so that we can deal with other questions from the floor right after this.
Okay, but I think the
Is that
second,
okay,
Mumtaz, I think the G question, that if the project involve venue in Singapore, deposit have been made. I think this one is between two countries. I think this one is between Malaysia and Singapore.
Possible, but I think Jay, if I'm not wrong, Jay is asking because actually the COVID-19 Act in Singapore helps him. If I'm not wrong, Jay, is this?
G, maybe you want to
Jay.
explain more to the questions, because from what I understand, because G is a Malaysian,
Oh,
I
I
think he's
see. Okay.
and he's dealing with Singapore companies for events and everything. So it really, I think it's need Mumtaz and Dato' Azlin to actually, answer these questions. So maybe Mumtaz, you can start first with me.
Hi Mumtaz. Mumtaz J here. Okay, so we do have events, book venues in Singapore. So then, can you hear me clearly?
Yes,
Can you
we
hear
can.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
we can.
I can. Hi, Jay.
Hi, Dato'. So the contract is between the booking agreement is between us and Singapore venue. So when it's postponed, or that or most probably cancelled, client wish to change venue and all that, how can we get refund? Because the venue are only offering vouchers to be used 2021, but if there's none, so how can we get the refund back?
Okay, so I think Kai is right. Maybe this crosses two jurisdiction. It is between a Malaysia company and a Singapore venue. Obviously, the first thing we need to look at is the jurisdiction clause in the contract. So usually when it's a multi-party, party belongs to different countries, there might be a jurisdiction clause that says, oh, in the event of a dispute, Singapore laws will apply, for example. If this clause is missing, or it's not clear where the governing contracts of the governing laws of this contract is, I would assume because the contract is to be performed in Singapore, you can have an argument that it might be a Singapore law that will apply. So Jay, your question is quite popular. In fact, the COVID-19 Temporary Measures Act deals head-on with this question. If you look at the act, which you can find when you Google Statute Singapore, Section 7 basically covers inability to perform event contract or tourism related contract. So it's specific. Under this COVID-19, whilst they help both contracting party kind of like sort out their obligation, they have a scheduled contract in the annex which says, okay, this act only applies to certain types of contract. And actually, event contract is one of them. Event contract is in the schedule, is also mentioned in section 7. Reason being, okay, so for example, let's use a simpler way to explain. Let's say I'm about to get married. Okay, and I then go to Raffles Hotel and I book Raffles Hotel. And then suddenly circuit breaker came in, or they say, oh, cannot, nobody can travel, or they say now only 10 people can attend your wedding, right? Based on the new guideline. I don't need the Raffles Hotel anymore. I don't need to guess 10,000 of my dad and mom's relatives, out of which maybe I know 50 people, but I don't need to guess them anymore. So then how do I tell Raffles, look, I don't want this contract anymore? And actually, what this act does is this act says if the event cannot continue, then that person, that organizer cannot do two things. Number one, they cannot sue you for the breach. Number two, they cannot forfeit your deposit. Means if you have paid a security deposit, let's say for my wedding, I paid 10K. to Raffles and I said, okay, my wedding will be later in July. Then now I find out it cannot lah because now only 10 people can attend it. So now I tell Raffles I'm not going to continue that contract. They're not entitled to forfeit the security deposit. But at the same time, it doesn't allow me to terminate it. I'm not supposed to say, I will never need you again. So this one usually people refer to a panel again to decide whether or not one the event can continue in a later time. So for concerts, for example, you might be able to change that contract to say instead of having it, for example, this year, we'll hold our deposit, we'll have it next year. You cannot say, no, I want all my deposit, but I want to cancel this contract because it's supposed to cover everyone's obligation. So it cannot be slanted towards just the person that wants to exit from the contract. You have to protect the organizers who are the ones suffering if, let's say, everyone exits. So that's the first. Number two, if the contract cannot continue, impossible, it's like frustrated. So something that Pak Rachman and Dr. Azlim brought up earlier, frustration means I got married already. So if I got married already, maybe online, which Singapore now allows, I don't need this venue anymore. There's no purpose for this venue. Then the panel might say, okay, since you didn't incur any cost, return back everything, all the 10K. But if you incur cost, you can show me the cost and we'll deduct from that. So maybe, for example, if a hotel is able to show, oh, we incurred cost because we ordered extra chairs for her event, then the assessor will say, okay, minus all those, and then you get back your deposit. So the quick answer to your question is you can rely on the event contractor to return your security deposit or at least not to forfeit it. But there should be some kind of arrangement when can we postpone this to. It is not enough for them to return to you in vouchers. These vouchers are not useful for you, obviously. So you can rely on the act to ask them to amend and modify the contract so that the event can continue later. Or if you wish to terminate for your security deposit to be returned, but minus whatever cost they have if the event cannot continue at another time. Is that okay? I'm not sure if Dr. Azlin has things to add because Malaysia might have a separate, if it's a Malaysia jurisdictional clause, I'm not sure how this will work for you.
No, I think it's a very good answer, especially because the venue is in Singapore. And actually, as you said, right, it is being addressed in your COVID Act, right, as to how it's being to be dealt with, and that's good. Actually, that's if there wasn't such thing, it'd be more difficult, for Jay to do anything about it. So now I think, I mean, of course, as you rightly said, also, I mean, it's I think this whole COVID-19 has been something which I mean, everybody's suffering. So it's not just the venue, it's the organizer, is whichever whatever role you are in this society, you are suffering in some way. So I think it's a shared burden. It's a shared burden. So say for example, Jay, you already paid for the deposit, and you feel that it can be postponed to next year, say. It's possible. It's not like a wedding, that, I mean, and you already got married or whatever. It's like something, a concert that can be postponed to next year. So, that deposit should be able to be, carried forward to next year. Right. But if it's an event which is like totally like impossible to do, except for the time that it was, during this time, then I think it's fair that the money be returned, especially like for hotels, for example. What did they lose? And if you put in a booking for July, you put the booking in March, you paid 10K. What did they lose? I mean, for it's only to block the function room, all right? So I mean, even if it's like okay, and then they take 10% out of the 10K, because it's like some of the administrative expenses or whatever to attend to you, whatever. I think that's okay if you don't intend to or you cannot postpone it in any way. But I think it must be followed. I think Jay would have to follow up. I mean, in Singapore, because the venue is there and it's easier to. And I mean, you need to take advantage of the COVID Act there.
Sorry, just to add, Jay, you have to file a notification for relief. So if you want to rely on Singapore law, because either the jurisdiction, the contract allows it, or it is empty, but you think because the performance is in Singapore, under this act, you have to file this thing called a notification for relief before you can say, I don't want you to forfeit my deposit, and I want to negotiate when we can have the event later. This notification for relief is found on the Ministry of Law website. So go and play around with it. If you need lawyers or any advice, you can come to any of the law firms in Singapore. I'm sure they'll be able to advise you.
How, Pak Rashman, is it the same matter happen in Indonesia? Because frankly speaking, I'm actually part of the Indonesian business owner. We actually run a fashion show. We are supposed to have a fashion show in JCC. It's called Indonesia Fashion Week. However, it has been postponed from April earlier. They actually telling us it's going to be postponed up to September. However, looking at the current situation, we couldn't get any people to come for the event, so we might want to actually share it with the organizer. Says that why don't we actually postpone this to next year, because even Olympic 2020 is actually postponed to 2021. Is there any way that we can actually talk this to the organizer, or is there any law that actually protecting them for us? Because to be fair, most of us actually paid our payment full lump sum already.
Yeah, well, I think it's unlike Malaysia and Singapore. The government didn't issue any regulation when it comes to rentals or venue rentals, including. So this is a matter that should be resolved by the parties themselves. But I think you can argue that since the building itself are not allowed to hold any functions during this, we call it PSBB, you can argue to the building that you have the right to move the schedule to next year without losing any deposit that you already paid.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any more question from the floor?
I think there's two questions by Imran, both I think it's Singapore, because he previously asked about MOM, I think. So Imran, am I right? This is for Singapore on your loans?
Yes, it's for Singapore.
Okay, so I will address both questions together because they're actually related.
Thank
So
you.
your first one is, can the banks drag a company or an individual to court for not paying their loans? And then number two, will there be any consolidation of payment after the COVID, or will all the loans just continue as per normal? Okay, again, the government quite smart. They foresaw this. You should Google this. I will give you what to Google, but I will give you the answer also. So you should Google MAS regulation COVID. Basically, it will bring you to the MAS page. In essence, it will tell you that for most loans, especially to do with the banks for property, that means your HDB, for example, if you cannot pay, or for example, bank loans to do with financial companies, renovation loan, student loan. There's a list of loans that they write. Generally, it's not commercial loan. Generally, it's a personal loan that you've taken, either a property, a student loan, a renovation loan. From April until December this year, you are allowed to write in and they should accede to a deferment. So means you can write in and say, look, I cannot pay for my HDB, or I cannot pay for my student loan. And actually, it also extends to car loan. Some people have loans with the banks for their cars. And instead of getting this impounded because they cannot pay, they have applied to the bank to say, can I defer the payment? It is a period of 6 months. Unfortunately, the other side less from this is that your interest continues to run. And there may be some late payment interest. So this part you have to really clarify. People don't really pay attention to it. So it's not a catch-all provision, even though you're allowed to defer it. For example, tenancy agreement, some tenant says, oh, we're going to defer, we cannot pay your rent in full. Even then, the landlord may say, sure, but I'm going to impose a late payment fee that runs at 1% per month. So there is some thinking to do whether you really need to defer it, whether or not you are able to incur this additional cost at the end of it. In terms of consolidation, there's two opinions on this. Number one is if you cannot pay and they file a bankruptcy or insolvency, then yes, there is a consolidation of payment. The courts will consolidate all your debtors, we call it together. What is your exact loan, that they will make a repayment plan. And in terms of priority, who gets priority is usually your employees first for companies, and then your secured mortgages. So your bank loans are usually secured against a property, and then the rest means your sales and your contractors and all that. The second view is if let's say you don't get sued, you just want to find out if I'm not bankrupt, but is there a consolidation payment for a particular bank? So maybe I have 4 loans with DBS for different things. Can I consolidate and tell them I'll pay it later? Yes. This is quite common in Singapore lately because of COVID, and I'm aware of this personally. There is an MAS advisory, and you can see the link that you Google later, that has encouraged all banks to consolidate all the repayment plans and to make sure, macam, for example, let's say your total loan for everything is 40,000. If you continue paying, let's say 20,000 a month, for them to be advised not to impose a late payment fee or a penalty fee on it. So you can consolidate it together, and it could benefit you because you might have like 3 personal loan but 1 commercial loan. So try and consolidate it together and try and avail yourself to relying on this process. Yeah, does that answer your question, Imran?
Yes, it does. Yep. Thank you.
No problem.
Can I just add something, guys?
Yes, please.
Okay, but actually, you know, we are very lucky in Malaysia, because in Malaysia we have a moratorium on all bank loans for individuals and SMEs, right? Starting from April to September for 6 months, and actually that helps a lot, you know, in these times, you know, when people are struggling, you know, and some have lost their jobs, and some are getting pay cuts, and some are suffering because of their businesses and all that. To have that moratorium, you know, for all our financial commitments, right? And that covers car loans, housing loans, and a lot of loans for individuals and SMEs, you know, and for us to defer that payment for 6 months until October, that helps a lot for us. So during this time, you know, if you have a housing loan or a car loan, starting from 1st of April, you don't need to pay for 6 months, and you don't even have to apply for it. It's automatic. Unless if you don't want to take advantage of this moratorium, then only you inform the bank, right? But if you want to take advantage of it, you don't even have to say anything. It is automatically done, right? So that helps a lot. And there's no late payment charges payable either. All right, but interest will be still calculated on the outstanding sums, which means that you probably have to pay a bit more after the 6 months. You have to pay a bit more in terms of your installments, or have your tenure extended a little bit. But of course, now, I mean, people are talking about the situation now, how they're going to survive now. Right, if it's going to give them a bit more money in their pockets because they don't have to service all these loans temporarily for 6 months, it helps a lot, right? And then they just continue paying it in October. But one of the challenges is that, you know, this moratorium does not affect credit card payments. For credit card payments, is the same. You still have to pay the installments, and I think that's the one that's affecting a lot of people, because it's I mean, a lot of people have got massive credit card bills to pay, and I think but that's the only one that they have to service. All the rest is deferred till October, so that's good for Malaysians. Okay.
I think if I may add from Indonesia perspective, I think well, I wish we have like automatically moratorium like Malaysian had. In Indonesia, the government only issue regulation that the bank should restructure the small and medium enterprise and individuals loan. It's not automatically, it doesn't state on put any details, but it's just policy that the bank should reduce the interest rate. One party, the debtors may only pay the interest, but this policy is a 1 year policy, meaning that the bank should follow this policy until March 2021. But I discussed with colleagues from banks. They actually advise us not to pay the loan, so the bank will be encouraged to restructure your debts. You're still paying the loan. Most likely, the bank will not approve application for restructuring or to reduce your interest. I think that's all for me.
Okay. Anybody have any more questions from the floor?
I think Fahana has posted one. No, Fahana just. Is this for Singapore?
Yes.
Kau kena check Ashul.
Aku tahu.
Betul lah, okay, for Singapore, okay. Okay, I must have a disclaimer first. I am not completely well versed in PDAPA laws, but I will try. Okay, so it exists on two fronts. Number one, whether or not by collecting information on visitors to your office, whether this will comply with PDPC. It does. So for example, you know, we have this app, Safe Entry, Trace Together and all that. You are allowed in your company to use these apps or even your own internal apps to collect data, including name, IC number, phone number, and you will comply with PDPC. The only thing that PDPC has let go of advisory is not to collect a copy. So you shouldn't be asking for copies of the IC. You shouldn't be retaining it for your purposes, and you shouldn't be retaining beyond what you need. So, for example, I would say because Singapore has come up with a recent advisory last week to say that COVID is infectious in the first 11 days, I would say you are supposed to delete all this information after 11 days of your visitor attending your office. So that's for visitors. And then how about your own staff? When you all go digital, how do you protect your information? It's slightly more difficult given that we're always online nowadays. So for example, one of the issue that we might have is this. I'm working from home clearly. So if I am required to work from home and anything around me, my surrounding affects privacy, confidentiality laws, especially because I'm a lawyer, it creates an extra problem because like you can hear, don't know if you can hear, my nephew is having like a ball of a time outside. But for example, if what you all say are loud, it breaches confidentiality laws clearly because my family can hear you sharing your legal issues with me. So these are things that companies are always thinking about. Do we breach confidentiality? Do we breach PDPC? The government has been very lax about it very recently. In fact, law firms used to get the trouble a lot with PDPC because maybe we send the wrong document to the wrong client. Very famous. Our secretaries and paralegal very famous for this. I don't know why. Or we never change the subject yet, and we have been taken to task by MinLaw for all these lapses. But recently, I've noticed that really they've taken a step back. The idea is that because it's a new norm, everybody is adopting to working online, working from home, collecting data that we need. So, for example, let's say your HR wants to send a document to you. Now they can't send it to your office. They have to actually expose your residential address. So under normal circumstances, that would have been a PDPC violation because why are you informing the courier or the paralegal or my secretary of my proper address? Only HR can have this. But under the new norm right now, we are allowed to, I would say for your company, take certain safeguards. Every time you have to disclose NRIC, residential address, health conditions, things that's definitely private, put a disclaimer there. in your emails, I prefer emails over WhatsApp. When you send something to a client or another member of your company, put a disclaimer to say, look, you cannot use this information beyond the work settings. Some companies says, please delete this email upon receipt. Please acknowledge that this will be bounded in your private, your confidential clause in your employment contract. So HR needs to look at this slightly tighter. Even though they are not taken to task for now, if this is really the new norm for the next 1 year, I would imagine that we need to start setting up certain disclaimers for the companies so that if we do it or if it leaks out or if we have to inform certain confidential information, we can still argue that we've taken safeguards for it not to leak beyond that. Does that help you, Fana, or you have a specific scenario that you want my advice on? Your mic.
I'm asking it on a generic level of understanding, like what is it expected at this current new norm for businesses in Singapore?
Okay, yeah. So not much guidance have been given by PDPC. They have a page called the PDPC advisory on collection of personal data during COVID-19. All it says is destroy it as soon as you don't need it anymore. I think they are also trying to think of ways to make this acceptable, because as much as you're forcing businesses to go online, you cannot make it to a point that they cannot operate given the confidentiality requirements. Yeah, so not much yet. I think we just have to monitor it, but take certain safeguards for the company.
Yeah, maybe I could just add, being in the IT industry, I know MAS still, sorry, you cannot hear me. I think MAS still put in their data security guidelines very stringently. So what I know, certain banks, some of which I have supported their home PCs, so I know what system they use. So they actually are required to use, if you understand, a VPN connection in, and all data that is transacted will be through the browser, either Chrome or Edge, nothing outside the browser. So that's how they actually, and they say it's a regulation by MAS. So I think they have tightened the security even further for banks under MAS. I'm not sure about MinLaw. But in general, I think most companies are very lax now in terms of data security, because I think most of us now are using home PCs to work, right? So that's really one issue already in terms of data breaches. All your data now in your download folder, all your company data is there. So and after that, my kid will use the PC, my wife will use the PC. There's a big issue that will come up soon. If I hear correctly, I got some people in IMDA telling me to be aware of all this. So for Singaporeans, especially if you are using this, be careful. It's best. That's why if you use an IT system, that is more secure. Everything is through the browser. So think about that. In fact, for me, myself, my practice is we are already using what you call virtual machines. So they log into my server and run Windows on my server. They are not running anything on their own PC. And I make that a requirement. Yeah. So those who are actually working from home, just be careful, especially Singapore companies.
Yeah, okay. I think there's one more question for Mumtaz from Mr. Majid. Since you are with MOM, I have reduced my headcount and now I'm just below the normal quota. Will my S-Pass holder be affected during this period? Is there a safe period from MOM? Yeah.
Okay, I was in MOM 10 years ago. Muka je muda, but I'm not that young. So I have to explain that most of my knowledge right now for employment law comes with the tons of advisories issued by MOM during this COVID-19. If anybody is a hiring manager or is a management in Singapore, every day there's something that you read in MOM, their website. The good news is that MOM has taken similar to what the banks in Malaysia has done, something similar to a moratorium. They have basically said during this period where most of our foreign employees are either stuck in their countries or they have to be let go, they will not enforce the quota strictly. So even if, let's say, for the next 3 months, your quota does not match your foreign worker and local worker quota do not match, they won't enforce it strictly. But it's a temporary measure. I can assure you that they will not allow this to continue beyond, for example, 3 months. So take some stock take, go and count whether you've met the quota for local and foreign worker. If you do, then great. If you don't, then you might need to consider whether or not you need to hire more locals just to maintain your foreign worker quota. You can hire cheaper locals. When I do restructuring for companies, I maybe tell them to hire maybe, for example, couriers, receptionists, people that are cheaper. It can be, it is not a hole in your pocket per se, but it still allows you to play around with the foreign worker quota.
It answers Mr. Majid's question. Okay. Is there any more question from the floor that you want to raise? If not, I have one question for Dr. Azlin. If let's say company A have a contract with company B and they have agreed to put a performance bond with the party and to put a performance bonds, but if the one party cannot fulfill the contract with the performance bond, with the law, can the performance bond be confiscated by the other party? Your speaker.
Actually, it all depends again on the whole contract, because I do quite a lot of these corporate contracts. Sometimes we talk about performance bonds and all that. It's a lot more complicated than your question, because you see you have to see the whole the obligations of the parties and what they need to do, and whether if it leads to confiscation of the performance bond, and what would lead to that confiscation of the performance bond. So I think for a question like that, we come back to the normal issue about the contract, whether it's under force majeure, and whether why did not the contract why can the contract be fulfilled? Is it because of a COVID-19 related event? Is COVID-19 declared as a force majeure thing? Is force majeure a clause in the contract? And if not, will doctrine of frustration be put there? I think all that has to be looked into in totality before we can come up to whether the performance bond can be confiscated, forfeited or not. All right, and actually corporate contracts are I mean it is really very very mind-boggling when you look at the details, and of course, as you know, corporate contracts are normally like so thick that you have to look through every clause and see how to address the matter. But I think at this stage, sometimes we talk about performance bond, and especially like you talk about international trade. I've got a lot of clients who are like stuck with certain things. They're supposed to deliver, and raw materials that got stuck in ports, and the inability to supply raw materials, and because of that, this particular company is not able to perform and fulfill their contracts elsewhere, and a lot of money is like tied up in performance bond and guarantees and LCs and all sorts of things. I think whatever it is, parties need to really go through the agreement, and then sit down together and see how they're going to resolve this thing, because it's not actually due to the fault of any party, as we know. All right, and actually I would very much say that now, right, first of all, for especially corporate contracts like this, you need to review the contract. Hopefully you have a contract, and sometimes these people, they don't really have a good contract. Hopefully they have a contract. Review their contract properly, see what next to do in terms of negotiating with the other partners. And even like when you talk about force majeure, right, force majeure has got its own notification. It's got you got to notify people, you got to go through a certain process and all that. It's not enough just to say that, oh, can COVID-19 and the MCO whatever falls under force majeure, and that's it. I don't want to do anything much because it's impossible for me to perform this contract, and full stop. It's not enough. right? If you want to invoke force majeure, okay, you need to look into your contract and see how you're going to and what is the process required in your agreement, right, relating to force majeure, and you need to do it fast. Okay, so once you done that, you know your position, and you got to think about the business side as well, whether if you're not willing to fulfill if you're not able to fulfill the contract, then is it something that's going to be like resolved soon, or it's never going to be resolved, or it's going to be resolved in 6 months, and how you're going to reposition yourself vis-a-vis the other parties of this contract, and then you need to negotiate with them to see whether, right, what is the best solution for all parties. I think even if you're talking about international parties, everybody's affected. That's the way. Well, the good thing about it is not like it's a Malaysian problem, and then if I were to speak to another party in UK, for example, they won't understand what I'm talking about. Right? It's like it's something that affects the whole world. So in international contracts, the good thing is that everybody understands this problem and everybody's affected, right? So when we talk about some logistic problems or some things that stuck in the ports and all that, everybody understands because everybody would have gone through the same. So I think negotiation is key here, right, in talking to all the parties in any of your contracts, whether it's a landlord and tenant, it's a supply agreement, it's whatever it is. I think it's best to just try to negotiate with the other party and see how you're going to resolve this on a win-win situation, because everybody is suffering, and I don't think I'm not one for this see you in court thing. Sometimes like in the US, it's very easy, everything is like see you in court. I don't believe that that's going to be the answer to all this, because it's best, as I said, it's a shared burden. So let's all think about review your contracts, see what is best for all parties, and don't take advantage of this COVID-19 situation. Right, try to be fair to everyone, and let's all have a go towards a win-win situation so that we can rebuild back all our businesses. Okay.
Is there anyone with? We can only take one more last question. Not then, yeah.
We have one question here from Mr. Majid.
Just another one. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I got a question. I had invoiced my client for 2 air tickets since February 20. Partial payment made in March and May, but my client cannot fulfill the balance 3,000. So,
I think that I think if it's for air tickets which has been purchased before, right, and it's been used, is it been used? All right, because it sounds as if somebody bought an air ticket before, but has it been used or not been used?
Yes, it's been used.
Yes, has been used. It's been used in February.
If it has been used, it's
used in February, and I issued a ticket in February. My client says that she will pay me. She made a partial payment in February, and then promised end of March to pay the rest. But apparently, they cannot make payment, so they delayed and started to pay a small sum. In May, they make another payment. I still have an outstanding of 3,000.
I think that's a clear-cut thing about a debt owing to you. I think it's just considered as a bad debt. It's not as if they bought the ticket and then they were not able to fly.
Oh, they already flew already.
They already flew, and
now I cannot recover my money from client.
So that to me that's just bad debt, right? And of course you have right to sue them for the balance, and
this client is not a customer. My client my client is also a travel agent. So this client bought the ticket from me, you see, and it's for a customer. So I'm dealing with the client, with the company.
Yeah, so whoever is supposed to pay you, right? If it's a travel agent, because if
Yes.
the relationship, the contract is between you and the travel agent, regardless of who
Yes.
flew, right?
I was
Right.
the travel agent, yeah.
So you have a right to collect the balance from the travel agent. And
Yeah,
I
it's
think
already June now.
but I think if they said that they are willing to pay, in installment or whatever, I would say go for it, because it's better than them not paying at all, unless you want to institute legal proceedings, which is something else altogether, right? Which may not be.
Can I go to a small claim, Miss Muntas? Muntas, yeah. You are a Singapore lawyer, maybe you can.
Yeah, for the Singapore, right?
Yeah, I agree with Dato actually. It's actually a debt due. If this invoice was already incurred, that means they ask you for the air tickets, you purchased it, you used it, and they have a balance. It's actually a debt due to you, which means you can pursue the debt. I'm not well versed in small claim only because lawyers are not allowed in small claim. If I recall, if I recall correctly, it covers all kind of debt except for commercial debt. So if it's a commercial contract, you might have issue pursuing a small claim, which means a lot of times our companies are stuck. The debt is too small for us, the comment section, yet we don't have any recourse. So Dato is right. I would suggest entering into an agreement, a loan agreement, make sure that there's an installment payment, and therefore later on, if you really have to, then you sue on that payment lah. You sue on the fact that payment is
Because
not.
I don't know, maybe just share with me. I'm trying to do this. I'm going to issue them a letter saying that I'm going to proceed with small claim, and I'm going to send a CC copy to STB. Then it will affect
To
the
STB. Oh, okay, because they are
they are a licensed travel agent.
Licensed travel agent. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with you. When there is a organization, means kalau macam insurance, then there's your EAA and all that. The best bet is to kind of like threaten them if you do not make payment, then we have issues of your liquidity, and therefore we have the right to inform the relevant parties, because obviously the liquidity of a company is really an issue when it comes to certain industries. And if it's a tourism industry, you're right, STB might inquire and all that. It actually won't do much, but it's just the
It won't do
pressure
much
of
because
having.
it's very difficult position now. Both of us also not in business. We don't have we don't have business. So they will say that I don't have money to pay. See? I'm just give me some time. That's about all.
Yeah, but Dato is right. Even if you give them some time, hopefully have this in a written form, have some kind of payment. It doesn't have to be a formal contract. But you say, look, to acknowledge you owe us this amount, to acknowledge that payment we made this way, this way, this way, this way, please reply to acknowledge everything. So you have a sort of a debt repayment plan that you can rely on later.
Okay,
Don't have a phone conversation. Don't be like,
No,
okay,
no.
pay later. It's not all
We based
interest.
on WhatsApp text messages. It's all recorded. Yeah.
Great, but make sure the terms are clear.
Yeah.
Make sure you say something like, for example, the last advice I can give you is, and I always do this, I tell people, if you don't make the installment payment, the whole amount becomes due. So if let's say you owe me 3K, you miss the first 500, I'm going to demand the whole 3K. I'm not going to wait 500, 500, 500.
I see.
So have something like that in your WhatsApp arrangement.
Can I introduce a charge of interest like 5% over the
Singapore
outstanding?
cannot. I don't know about other countries. Singapore is very tight of our money lending act. If any company impose an interest, you become a money lender, and therefore you can get charged. So please don't do it. You have to find me for the criminal action pula. Please don't do it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Hey, we have come to an end. It's 5 o'clock. Hopefully it's a fruitful for everyone. And I would like to thank us, Azlin and Laxman. Pak Laxman. So if any of the three speakers would have any words to say, if not, we will end this session for today.
Yeah, I would like to add to all the participants who've been in the Zoom session but been very quiet, but that's normal, no problem. I would just want to say something that with in regards to our initiative of Zoom networking through all these countries, we have brought the best person that we can actually refer to. So from now on, we know when come to law in Singapore, we can call Miss Mustas. When come to Malaysia, we can look for Dato'. When it comes to Malaysia, we can look for Pak Rashman. So I'm glad all of you actually come together and explain, even though it was quite a short notice. We hope that we can come to you and refer for
Inshallah.
many matters.
Inshallah.
Because we also have a group chat where we all can communicate there. So if you have any legal advice to ask from all our three lawyers, then yeah, you can do so through the group chat.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Dato', yes.
Yeah, I like to thank the Tosh Group, Kai, Muntas, Paraman, and everybody, all the participants of this Zoom networking. And I think it's good to get everybody together. And I've learned a lot too about how things are in Singapore, in Indonesia. And I think for all of us lawyers, it's knowledge which it will be very useful. Even when we do our work in our own various countries. So thank you so much, and keep in touch. Inshallah. I mean, there's anything in Malaysia that I can help out or anything, just Kai, you know where to find me.
Yeah,
So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thank
day.
you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
See
you,
all soon.
everyone. So we keep in touch in the group chat.
Bye.
Thank you.
Assalamualaikum.
Okay, inshallah. Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih.
Salam.